guys, welcome back. So in the previous tutorial, what we did was we sent a username and password to this login.salesforce, and in response, we received the server URL and the session ID. So now in this tutorial, we are going to make another SOAP API call, and this time we will go ahead and query the account records. So how are we going to do is we are going to click on this plus icon and we'll create a new request. And here the URL that we are going to use will be the one that came from this response. So this is the URL. So let's just go ahead and copy this URL here. I'm just going to go ahead and copy this one. And here I'm going to change it and let's just leave it to C. This is going to be the URL that I've used. Now the header information, so I have to set up the SOAP action. This is going to be the first header that I'm going to set, and the value is going to be just an empty string. And then the content type, and since this is going to be a SOAP method call, so this is content type can only be XML, okay, no JSON. So here I'm going to select the text XML. And in the body, I'm going to select the raw as the data type and then the XML here. And then this is going to be the body for the message. So here, I'm going to go ahead and paste this over here. Now replace this session ID with the one that you have received in the previous call. So if you go here, this is the session ID that you retrieved from the previous call. So let's just go ahead and copy this session ID here. So let's just go ahead and copy, make sure because if it is expired or if you have taken some time off in between, then send that request again and get the latest session ID. And this is the session ID which Salesforce is going to use to authenticate ourselves, to tell that, hey, I am the right person to make this call. So this is the envelope. So you can see here, if you look at the whole request, let me increase the size here. You can see here, this is the SOAP envelope, and which tells you that we're making a SOAP call. This is the header. In the header, we are passing in the session ID, which we retrieved from the previous call. And then this is the query string. So if you wanted to retrieve from a different object, let's say you want to retrieve from a account object or a case object, etc., you can go ahead and make that query. Okay, so if you want to retrieve from a different object, you just have to change the object name here, and then if any other fields you're interested in besides the ID and the name, you can enter those fields as well. So let's just go ahead and make this, send this, and you can see here it says 405 method not allowed. Yes, the reason the method not allowed is because you're making a GET request. We have to make a POST request. That's why. So you can see here method not allowed. So this is the error code that returned because we were making a GET request instead of a POST request, and that's why. So the headers have been set here properly. The body has been defined here, the session header, and then now we're going to do a send. Now once we do the send, you can see here the status came as 200, which is good. And then you can see in the response, we got it also gives us the API limit. And then in the response, you can see this is the query response, and it gave you the ID of the account record and then the name. And if you wanted more information, then you can add that in the request query. So it gave you all the account records that we had. Now the same thing, let's say I wanted to go ahead and query a different custom object, I can do that. Now let's say I wanted to retrieve another field of the account object, you can do that. So let's say if I go back to my account here, let's go to the object manager and click on the account object, and here let's say I'm interested in the account number. Let's just go ahead and copy this as well and then paste it inside of our Postman, and then we are going to retrieve the account number. So now when we do the send, along with the ID, and let's say go ahead and add the ID and do a send here. So you can see along with the ID, it is going to give you the account number and then name. This is going to be the name, account number, and the ID. So these all three things are going to be returned. ID, account number, and the name for the account. And it is retrieving you all the different accounts that are available. So now we're going to, this is how you make a request. So now let's go ahead and save this. We will save it inside of this collection folder. And then here I'm going to call this as SOAP query account. In this call, we are making a request to retrieve all the account records, and this is what we've done. So I repeat here again, one important point to remember is you have to pass the session header. And if the session header is invalid, okay, let's say we ended up removing this U at the end, which is part of the session ID. And if I try to make the send, you can see here you got a server error because the session ID was wrong. That's why the session ID is invalid. So you have to make sure that you're passing in the correct session ID and it's not been timed out. Okay, after a while the session ID will no longer be valid, so you have to make a request to get the latest session ID. And then here now, once I updated the session ID to the right one, then it came back with the response. Now this header information is also very important. So let's say if I go ahead and remove this header, okay, let me just go ahead and remove this, and I try to make a call, and if I do the send, this time also it is going to give me an error because the SOAP action HTTP header is missing. So this is also very important. So whenever you're making this call, you have to provide the SOAP action header as well. So here I'm going to choose the SOAP action again, and then we're going to choose an empty string as a value, and then select this and then hit the send. So now the response came back again, and it also came back with the limit, how many calls you can do, API request, and these are all the different account records. So let's go ahead and save this, and now we have 2 calls inside our collection. So this is how you make a SOAP call to query a standard object. Okay, you can write your exact query. If you wanted to, let's say if you wanted to pass a particular where clause, so how we will do that? So where name is equals to, let's say if this is going to work. Yep, it worked, and it will only return you the edge communication as the output because you have a where clause, and in the where clause you have said that I'm only interested in the account which is equal, where the name is equals to edge communications. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get rid of this because I don't want a where clause. I wanted to have all the account records.